19B BY. 36 hours after Order 66 went galaxy-wide. Darth Vader, encased in a suit he'd never worn before, moving on cybernetic legs that were still calibrating to his nervous system, received his first mission from Palpatine. Not the consolidation of a galactic empire. His master sent him to find a Jedi and take his kyber crystal. The Jedi he found was Kirak Infil'a, a human Jedi Master who had taken the Barash Vow years earlier, a sacred oath of total withdrawal from all Jedi Order affairs, so complete that Order 66 technically had no jurisdiction over him. He had been living in solitude on the river moon of Al-Dalim, entirely removed from galactic events. He was the one surviving Jedi who could have made the legitimate argument that the whole catastrophe wasn't his problem. Vader went after him anyway. Their first fight is documented in the 2017 Marvel Darth Vader comic series, written by Charles Soule, issues 2 through 5. Infil'a was a combat specialist. That was his designation, his area of Jedi training, the thing the Order had specifically developed him for. He read the new arrival the moment Vader stepped onto Al-Dalim. He didn't run. He came down from his meditation perch and came directly at Vader, and what followed was a systematic demonstration of what happens when a fully capable Jedi Master with healthy limbs and unimpeded force sensitivity meets a man still adjusting to prosthetic legs and a breathing apparatus. Infil'a put Vader on the ground. He got hold of Vader's armor and nearly launched him off a cliff edge, thousands of feet above the moon's river systems below. Left him broken enough that the mission appeared to be over. Soule described the fight's outcome in an interview without ambiguity. Kirak Infil'a beat Vader, no question, and the only reason Vader eventually won was because he was willing to do something Infil'a wasn't. What Infil'a wouldn't do, what no Jedi trained in the light could do, was harm bystanders. Vader destroyed a nearby settlement, flooded it, used the deaths of people who had nothing to do with any of this as leverage, forcing Infil'a to choose between pursuing his enemy and saving lives. Infil'a chose the lives. Vader used that moment of divided attention to close the distance and end it. It was his first week on the job. The fight left the suit severely damaged. Vader crossed the moon again, acquired Infila''s lightsaber, then had to get himself back to Mustafar, the planet he'd burned on, the place his old life had ended, to corrupt the crystal so it would run red. In the Soul Run's opening arc, we see what that corruption process looks like from inside Vader's mind. The crystal resisted. It called up everything Anakin had poured into it during years of Jedi service, and it held that light against Vader's darkness. What emerged from that internal pressure was a vision. Vader returning to Obi-Wan after Order 66, still bleeding, still broken, asking to be killed. And in the vision, Obi-Wan refuses. He forgives him instead. Vader looked at this version of himself, the one that had a way back, and said no. He drove the darkness into the crystal until it ran the color of blood and said, "This is all there is." That isn't a man who has settled something. That is a man suffocating a possibility that is still fighting to breathe. Jocasta Nu came next. The Jedi Archivist, not a combat specialist, not a duelist, just the woman who had spent decades maintaining the Jedi Temple's libraries, had been trying to preserve intelligence about surviving Force sensitives before the Empire could eliminate it. Vader hunted her across issues 9 through 10 of the Soul Run. She died in a crash Vader engineered, riding a pilotless patrol ship down rather than surrender what she knew. She had assembled a list of Force-sensitive children scattered across the galaxy, a document that, in Palpatine's hands, would have given the Empire a roster of every potential future Jedi. Vader destroyed the intelligence along with her to prevent it reaching his own master. Even 3 months into his role as Sith apprentice, his agenda and Palpatine's weren't perfectly aligned. Inside the Jedi Temple, on the night of Order 66 itself, Vader killed Sin Dralig, the Temple's chief lightsaber instructor. He killed Farron Barr during the Purge's early operations. He killed younglings still inside the Temple while they were supposed to be safe behind its walls. The Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series makes that last point explicit. The Inquisitor known as Reva, the third sister, had survived the Temple massacre as a child by playing dead after Vader cut down her fellow younglings beside her. That's how she ended up in his service. Trauma and proximity to the source of it, which is a very specific Vader speciality. Then came Obi-Wan, in 9 BBY, roughly a decade into the Empire. Vader didn't send anyone else after his former master. He went himself. Their first encounter during the Disney Plus series ends with Vader dominant in ways that feel almost leisurely. He buries Obi-Wan under a collapsing ridge, pins him with the Force, and drags him partially through fire across the ground, while Obi-Wan tries to stay conscious. There is nothing tactical about it. Vader is using the maximum available force against a man who can barely stand, and he's doing it slowly. He doesn't finish the fight when he could. He lets Obi-Wan be extracted by allies. He watches Obi-Wan get away. It reads, in retrospect, less like a hunter being denied his kill than like something else, something that wants the game to continue. Their second confrontation goes differently. Obi-Wan draws on something beyond his physical state, shifts from survival to offense, and doesn't stop. He shatters Vader's chest panel. He strikes the helmet until it cracks across the faceplate. And in the gap the crack opens, visible through the broken mask, is Anakin Skywalker's face. Scarred, pale, human, real. The lighting in that shot is deliberate. Blue on one side of the exposed face, red on the other. Two identities dividing the same skull. Obi-Wan stops swinging. He stands there looking at what the mask had been hiding. Vader gets back up. When Obi-Wan escapes again, pulled out by allies a second time, Vader shouts after him. He wants the engagement to continue. He had the dominant position for most of the series, and the moments it slipped away produced not strategic regrouping, but audible fury. So the baseline is established. Vader wasn't cautious. He wasn't reluctant. He absorbed catastrophic damage in pursuit of specific targets, went after opponents who posed genuine physical danger, lost fights and came back, and sometimes pursued objectives that didn't serve Palpatine's interests. That's who we're talking about when we talk about the gap in his record. By the time the Inquisitorius was fully operational, Vader had an entire institutional apparatus for finding Jedi survivors. The Inquisitors were recruited from among the fallen, former Jedi who had been broken and reconverted. The ninth sister, whose name before her conversion was Masana Tide, had been a Jedi Knight. The Grand Inquisitor had been a Jedi Temple Guard. Vader trained them personally, which in his case meant removing 2 of their sword arms and 1 of their eyes during lightsaber sparring, teaching them, as the Soul Run frames it, lessons in loss. He knew how to direct that apparatus. He used it constantly across 2 decades. No documented record exists of a single Inquisitor ever receiving orders to locate Grand Master Yoda. Yoda had survived Order 66 on Kashyyyk by killing his own clone escorts before they could execute him, then escaping with Bail Organa. He returned to Coruscant, reset the Jedi beacon alongside Obi-Wan to warn survivors away from the temple, and then walked into the Republic Senate chamber and fought Palpatine personally. The skirmish in the Senate ended without a decisive winner. Yoda retreated through a garbage chute. Palpatine watched him go. Then Yoda went into exile on Dagobah, where he remained for the next 22 years. By the time Luke Skywalker crash-landed his X-Wing into a Dagobah swamp during The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda had been living in that hut long enough that he treated the arrival of a stranger as a minor inconvenience. He went through Luke's supplies looking for food. He complained about the quality. The Empire never found him in all that time, and the tactical case for why is genuinely worth building out, because it's the answer most Star Wars fans land on first, and it holds up. Vader's suit, built immediately after Mustafar, was a life support system first and armor second. The scientist Silo constructed it to keep a catastrophically injured man alive, not to optimize a Sith warrior for prolonged elite combat. Vader described it to Palpatine as adequate in the Soul Run's opening issue, and the early comics document what adequate actually meant in practice. His cybernetic legs were heavy enough to affect his gait. His cybernetic arms sometimes responded too slowly to translate intended movements in real-time combat. Every day inside the suit brought neural probes interfacing directly with his nervous system at connection points throughout the armor. Environmental controls pressing against scar tissue that never fully healed. A respirator cycling at its own regulated pace, while Vader's body demanded different things depending on exertion. That breathing, mechanical, metered, indifferent to circumstance, is the constant audible signature of what Mustafar cost him. Against Kirak Infil'a, a combat specialist who had the edge on Vader partly because the suit made him less physically adaptive than Anakin had ever been, Vader nearly died in their first encounter. That was against a Jedi who had been in isolation for years, not against the Grand Master of the entire Order, a 900-year-old Force user who had held his own against Palpatine at the height of the Chancellor's power, who had fought with a lightsaber style built entirely around turning an enemy's strength into their own destruction. The suit's electrical vulnerabilities add a harder dimension to that calculation. The first time Force lightning penetrates Vader's armor decisively on screen is Return of the Jedi, when Palpatine's attack reaches the suit's exposed points and ultimately kills Vader in the process. A life support system built from practical necessity rather than tactical engineering carries that kind of risk. Yoda, who had dueled Palpatine, the galaxy's most capable practitioner of Force lightning, and survived, represented exactly the kind of threat the suit was least equipped to absorb. Dagobah added another layer. The planet carries a dark side vergence centered on what canon identifies as the Cave of Evil, a location so saturated with dark side energy that its influence extended across the entire planet's surface. Because that dark side presence functions as overwhelming background noise in the Force, it appears to have masked a single Force-sensitive presence living within it. One darkness swallowed by a larger one, effectively indistinguishable through conventional tracking methods. George Lucas actually filmed Yoda's arrival on Dagobah. The deleted scene from Revenge of the Sith, cut for pacing reasons, not removed for story problems, shows Yoda landing in an escape pod, stepping onto the planet, and receiving contact from Qui-Gon Jinn's Force Ghost. This wasn't a hiding place Yoda stumbled into. It was a destination the Force directed him toward, a detail Lucas chose to film and then chose not to show. So the tactical answer, assembled whole, looks like this. Palpatine watched Yoda escape the Senate personally and knew he was alive. The Empire dedicated nothing documented to finding him. Dagobah's dark side properties made it functionally difficult to locate one Force presence there. Vader's suit had specific vulnerabilities a combatant with Yoda's capabilities would have been uniquely positioned to exploit. The case for non-pursuit, written out, is solid, but it doesn't explain why Vader never appears to have wanted the search. He went personally after Obi-Wan, who had defeated him on Mustafar, who knew his weaknesses intimately, who was dangerous in specifically personal ways. He went after combat specialist Jedi Masters on their own ground. The tactical excuse covers the outcome. It doesn't explain the absence of interest. For that, you have to look at who Anakin Skywalker was, and then you have to look at what Vader did to him. Anakin's official rank at Order 66 was Jedi Knight, though the circumstances of that rank were loaded. He had trained a Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, all the way through to knighthood, which conventionally earned the trainer promotion to master. The Jedi Council denied him that promotion. Mace Windu's exact line in Revenge of the Sith is direct and public. "We won't grant you the rank of master." He was referred to as Master Skywalker in the Clone Wars as an honorific, never as an official title. The denial was deliberate, a reflection of institutional distrust, and it was one more source of grievance Palpatine had spent years carefully cultivating in a man who collected them. Beyond rank, Anakin carried the Chosen One designation, the ancient prophecy that one would come to bring balance to the Force by destroying the Sith. Obi-Wan recites it on Mustafar, furious and heartbroken, as Anakin burns on the bank. "You were the Chosen One. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. You were to bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness." That Jedi, the one the prophecy pointed at, the one the Order staked its future on, didn't die on Mustafar. He didn't die in the suit. What happened instead was something stranger and far more demanding. Anakin Skywalker had to be continuously murdered over a period of 20 years. Issue 8 of the Soul Run contains a full-page image of Vader in meditation that shows what his interior landscape looks like when his defenses come down. His own form appears as a black-red mass of energy, barely humanoid in shape. His severed limbs float around him in pure white, Anakin's color. Below him, a raging black sea. Above him, the sky screams with purple lightning. And scattered through the image, the only points of light, small flocks of glowing blue butterflies, representing what remains of Anakin Skywalker. He is meditating, and this is what he finds. Blue light he hasn't finished killing. The language Vader uses when Anakin surfaces is consistent enough across canon to function as behavioral data. He refers to Anakin in the third person, always, as a separate entity he has already disposed of. Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him. That line appears in the Rebels animated series and throughout the Soul comic run, delivered with the flat certainty of someone announcing a completed action. He calls Ahsoka Tano the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, rather than acknowledging his own former Padawan. He refers to Luke as the son of Skywalker, rather than his own son. The third-person construction is systematic. Every reference to Anakin positions him as something that existed in the past, belonged to someone else, and has no claim on the present. If that destruction were actually complete, the mantra wouldn't be necessary. You don't repeatedly announce the death of something that's gone. The constant reassertion of Anakin's death is evidence of the opposite. The suppression requires active maintenance, because the killing keeps not taking. Palpatine understood this dynamic from the beginning. In the Soul Run, he explicitly tasks Vader with destroying his remaining attachments as part of his Sith formation. The objective isn't just to make Vader powerful, but to make him hollow. A Sith without attachments is a weapon without a safety mechanism. But to hollow him out completely, you first have to acknowledge there's something to remove. The suit's constant pain, the serial missions, the isolation, all of it served a purpose beyond operational. It kept Vader too occupied with surviving to sit with who he'd been. The Greg Pak 2020 Darth Vader comic run, set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, shows what happens when that maintenance fails. Palpatine sends Vader back to Tatooine as punishment for the Cloud City incident, where Vader had tried to recruit Luke to help him overthrow the Emperor. The return to his childhood home is catastrophic for Vader's psychological architecture. Memories of Padme surface in flashbacks woven through the present narrative, the past and present layering over each other as Vader moves through the planet of his earliest slavery and his earliest love simultaneously. In a key vision sequence, Yoda's face appears among the haunting images, even his former enemy entangled in the life before. The path to Yoda runs through Anakin. That's why any calculation about a Yoda hunt was never purely tactical. The Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus series brings the suppression mechanism into its sharpest focus. Reva, the third sister, uses the name Anakin as a weapon against Obi-Wan in the series' early episodes. She deploys it precisely because she understands it's loaded, because she knows the history, because she survived the Temple Massacre by playing dead while the person who became Vader moved through the room, killing her peers. She carries that knowledge as currency. The name functions as a grenade across the series, handled by everyone involved with the careful attention you extend to something genuinely volatile. Then comes the finale. Obi-Wan and Vader's final confrontation in the series plays out on a barren rock landscape under a dark sky, and after the mask cracks, after Obi-Wan has split the helmet and Anakin's face is visible in the gap, blue light on one side, red on the other, the two men stop. What follows isn't a continuation of the fight. It's something more uncomfortable than that. Obi-Wan speaks to what he can see through the break in the faceplate. He acknowledges the fall, takes some of the weight of it onto himself. And Vader's response comes back in a voice that shifts, that the actors and production have noted carries something different in that moment, something between the two men it contains. His answer, as rendered across multiple source transcriptions of the episode, is, "Anakin is gone. I am what remains." When Obi-Wan pushes further, pointing out that Vader did this to himself, the response is, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did." He frames the death of his former self as an act of will, a choice. He takes ownership of it, the way you'd take credit for something you fought for and won. Obi-Wan's response is 6 words, "Then my friend is truly dead." He lowers his saber and walks away. He stops wanting the fight. Vader is left behind, shouting after him, confused by the withdrawal, wanting the engagement to continue. He had declared his victory over Anakin. He had dominated most of the encounter. And Obi-Wan accepting that declaration, walking away without grief, without reaching, is what undoes him. The thing Vader was really fighting in that exchange was the argument that Anakin might still be reachable. The moment Obi-Wan stops believing that, the fight loses its meaning. Vader needed his former master to still see Anakin so he could keep destroying that belief. When Obi-Wan concedes the point, there's nothing left to win. That's not the reaction of a man who has settled the question. The Soul Run's final issue, 25, makes the psychological structure explicit in a different way. Vader opens a portal on Mustafar. He'd been trying to breach the boundary between life and death to find Padme, and instead of finding her, he walks through his own life. Tatooine in childhood, the Clone Wars, laid out panel by panel. In one of the issue's most striking images, Vader's adult armored form bursts from the shadow cast by the young Anakin standing in Tatooine's sunlight, the dark side emergent from the light side, one casting the shadow of the other. He meets apparitions of Obi-Wan and Palpatine, the two poles of everything he became. He moves through the Jedi Temple, and while he does, his grandson's voice, Kylo Ren's, a man not yet born, echoes across the vision. "Let the past die. Kill it if you have to." The Force is communicating something. Vader remains torn. When he reaches Padme in the vision, she turns on him. She declares Anakin Skywalker dead herself, then disappears. Palpatine contacts him after and asks if his time on Mustafar was productive. Vader answers, yes. Soule explained what that yes means in a StarWars.com interview. It wasn't what Vader was looking for. It was what he needed. The acceptance that his old life is unchangeable, that the path is forward. And before the vision closes entirely, the last thing Vader sees is a figure standing at the horizon, a single warrior holding a blue lightsaber. Anakin's lightsaber, the one Obi-Wan had preserved, the one that would eventually reach Luke Skywalker's hands. The Soule commentary frames this as grim acceptance of fate, not terror, but it's also unmistakably an encounter with something Vader can't stop seeing. The blue butterflies in issue 8, the figure with the blue lightsaber in issue 25, the face behind the cracked mask in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Anakin keeps appearing in the record, not because Vader seeks him out, but because suppression isn't eradication. Every time Vader's defenses drop, in meditation or in extremity or in the presence of the man who knew him before all of this, Anakin is there. Here's the argument stated plainly. Anakin Skywalker was a Jedi Knight, official rank, conferred by the Order, held through the Clone Wars, active at the moment of Order 66. He served as a Jedi General. He trained a Padawan to knighthood. He carried the Chosen One designation. By every formal classification, Anakin Skywalker was a Jedi. Darth Vader never fought him, not with a lightsaber, not in any confrontation that would produce a winner and a loser. He killed him psychologically, buried him in language, suppressed him in meditation, denied him in speech, and maintained that denial as an ongoing project across 2 decades. A fight reaches a resolution. What Vader did to Anakin produced a stalemate he had to re-win continuously, a verdict that kept getting appealed from the inside. Against Kirak Infil'a, there was a fight to finish. Against Jocasta Nu, there was intelligence to destroy. Against Obi-Wan, there was a confrontation to dominate and a wound to keep reopening. Against each of those opponents, Vader could take an action that produced a result. Against Anakin, there was no equivalent action available. There was only the ongoing refusal to look, and the growing body of evidence, in visions and cracked masks and blue light in his meditations, that the refusal was costing him more than he was willing to acknowledge. Return of the Jedi is where that cost comes due. Luke Skywalker stands before Vader on the second Death Star and does something no opponent in 20 years of the Purge had done. He doesn't attack. He calls him Father. He says, "There is good in you. I can feel it." The Emperor, listening nearby, is already running calculations on how to redirect this. Luke keeps going. He says he can sense the conflict within him, that he's not like the Emperor, that Anakin Skywalker is still there. And then Palpatine's lightning starts tearing Luke apart, and Vader stands there, watching it happen. Everything in Vader's 20-year project of self-erasure says this is where he should stay still. Anakin Skywalker was weak. He destroyed him. This is all there is. But what he had spent 20 years building couldn't survive the sound his son made when the lightning hit. Couldn't survive watching someone who carried his eyes and Padme's determination get pulled apart in front of him. He picks Palpatine up. He walks him to the shaft. He throws him in. Then he falls. Luke takes his mask off because Vader asks him to. He wants to look at his son with his own eyes, not through the lenses, not through the mechanical mediation of everything the suit is, just his eyes. Anakin's eyes. Vader spent 20 years insisting that name was dead. He said it in meditation, in fury, in the flat third-person language he used to refer to his former self as a stranger. He built an organization specifically to hunt everyone who carried the Jedi identity. He endured damage that would kill most beings. In the Infil'a fight, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, in 20 years of accumulated punishment, to eliminate Jedi he identified as threats. The one he couldn't eliminate was the one he never once chose to face directly. Because confronting Anakin meant confronting everything that followed the night he pledged himself to Palpatine. Padme's death, the temple, the younglings, the decades of serving a master he despised under a suit that never stopped hurting. Confronting Anakin meant confronting the fact that destroying his former self had not solved the problem it was supposed to solve. The grief was still there. The guilt was still there. The butterflies were still blue. Luke didn't defeat Darth Vader with a lightsaber. He called him by the name Vader had spent 20 years declaring dead, and the name answered. The Jedi Vader refused to face was always there. He just never looked. Subscribe for more stories like this.